Hi everybody, how's it going? Today I want to talk about the Kindle Basic and the Kindle Paperwhite. This is, I believe, the 11th generation. It's the most recent one. Just want to tell you what the differences are. I know there's like 700,000 of these videos, but hey man, I wanted to do my own take on it. So I love reading, man. I read all the time. I read every day. Sometimes I read a whole book in a day, Sometimes when that's what I want to do. I like movies and books. So I'm always doing one of the two. So the Kindle is a very special device to me. I'm not really going to get in the whole thing now about ebooks versus paper and all that kind of jazz, but to me, man, this is like a godsend for my habits. So we got both of these. Price wise, man, I think this one's like 90 and this one's like 140. So there's a pretty big difference there. They go on sale all the time though. Which one do I recommend? Well, I'm going to tell you straight up, I definitely recommend the Paperwhite. Absolutely. If you're somebody who likes to read a lot, you really like to read, Paperwhite. For someone who reads a couple books a year, probably this one. But there's so many better things about this that I would almost always recommend this one. It's hard to recommend a device that's this expensive to somebody who only reads a couple books a year and just thinks like, hey man, yeah, maybe I'll get one of those. Because there's certainly people like that. There are a lot of people that don't really want books taking up space in their house and don't want to go to the bookstore or what have you, and just want a simple device like this for whenever a book catches their fancy. And probably this one would be fine. But for most people, like I've already said, probably this one. But let's go through the different options, all right? I'm going to show you what's going on here. So first off, with both of these, the light is turned up to 24, which is the maximum. And as you can already see, this has a little bit more of a yellowish tone to it than this. And I think that's mostly because this has 4 lights. As a matter of fact, excuse my videography skills, but if I always go like that, you can see those 4 lights at the bottom, right? You can probably see them. Now, very rarely do they actually come out, as if like I see them at the bottom. By the way, if you pause this video at any point, you're going to find some funny text on these pages because I read some weird books. But the lighting on this is good. I'm not going to say it's crappy. I very rarely had an issue with the lighting, to be honest with you. It's totally serviceable. This just is more encompassing, and there's the warm light, which we'll get into. The other big difference, of course, as you can see, is the size. This is, I believe, a 6-inch screen, and this is a 6.8-inch screen, and I have to tell you that that's been quite a big difference for me. I didn't think it was going to be. It wasn't even anything I considered when I got it. I was more concerned about the pixel density, which we'll talk about as well. But the size was pretty striking, and you can see the size difference. It's taller and it's wider. And you can fit a lot more text on the page, right? Now, I prefer that more text can be fit on the page because to me this feels a little bit more, and it's never going to quite feel like I'm reading a book, a real book, but it feels more like I'm actually reading a book. Like this looks more closer to a page of a book, whereas this is just a little microcosm of a book, if you will. So I definitely prefer the larger screen size, and in running with that theme, we have a flush screen, which you can clearly see the screen is just flush. I'm just going all around here touching stuff. Whereas this, it's indented. And, for some weird reason, I like the feel of the indented screen more than this. And I think that's because with this flush screen, it feels a bit more like a tablet or a premium device, which some people might like. It makes it feel less like a cool little niche book, electronic book item, which is kind of what this feels like. But I have to tell you, after using this, this is pretty responsive. Very rarely, once in a while when you go like that to swipe, do you have any issues? But this is just overall a better experience. So I think overall I prefer the flush screen, although some people might prefer that. The size, though, truly is the thing that I find I really like the size difference. The one downside to the size is that this fits in my hand like that, like a glove. The first time I bought this, I picked it up and I thought, oh my God, this is my first e-reader. I just thought, I'm gonna read a lot more books now, man. It's just gonna be really convenient. I'll read books at work. I'll read books on my breaks. I'll read books in bed. It's just super, super small and convenient to read. And of course, text isn't an issue because you can increase the size. You can do whatever you want. That's the cool thing about these things. But Yeah, the size is great in terms of the hand feel. Now with this one, let me get this in my hand. It's a little bit harder to hold, okay? Now, I'm not going to say, I have fairly small hands for a guy, so it's a little bit hard to hold. I'd say it's on the verge of being uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable, if that makes sense. This is something where I'm currently, because I'm fairly new into using this device, I'm currently not quite comfortable holding this as I am with this one, but it's something I think I could get used to. But this device, both devices are about the same weight, I'm going to tell you that. Maybe this one is actually a little bit lighter, but they both feel about the same. This one I can hold a little more comfortably like this, and then you can just change the page like that. And this is light enough where it doesn't really feel too heavy in my hand, personally. Like this doesn't feel top heavy, like it's kind of falling over or like I'm straining to hold this thing up. I feel like I could probably sit here and hold this thing in my hand like this for 2 hours and not really have an issue. So the size difference is just something I'm getting used to. I prefer the increase in size, but in terms of holding it, that one's just slightly more comfortable at the moment. I think I'll get used to it though. And while we're talking about the actual design, take a look at the back here. This is very dirty. Both of these are fingerprint magnets and dirt magnets. That's a downside, but this is just plastic, and this is like a matte finish. You know, that matte, rubbery, kind of grippy, sort of soft plastic. This feels more premium. I always am a fan of matte plastic. My points go to this one. It's just super, super comfortable and feels great to hold. This feels like cheap plastic. And I'm going to say, like, my running theme, as I said in the beginning, is that this one is fine. I'm not going to tell you that this is a crappy device, but it does feel at times like corners were cut. This plastic is serviceable, but cheap feeling, okay? It does feel cheap. This doesn't really feel cheap to me. Nothing really feels like corners were cut here. Now this one is going to pick up fingerprints, and there's some nasty dirt in there. This is going to pick up fingerprints. This is going to pick up dirt easier. Pick your poison, and that's kind of how that is. Now some differences here. One more thing I want to point out, and this is a big thing. We got a USB-C port here. Big fucking deal for me. USB micro. Okay, USB-C, big deal. Everything is using USB-C now. My phone, my headphones, everything. This is just super convenient. I don't have to bring around another cord. Bam, use my phone charger. Battery life-wise, the battery life on this is excellent. This is a tip for everybody. Always put on your airplane mode. Shut the Wi-Fi off. Do that. It's going to save the battery big time. But battery life is a little bit better on here. Now, the battery life on here is nothing to scoff at. It's great. Even with the backlight kicking, I can read for several days at a time. Now, I read a lot, so some people say, oh, I can read for weeks on my Kindle. Well, I read a lot, man. Sometimes I'll just sit there and all I do all day is read. So I get several days out of this sometimes when I'm reading. Sometimes when I go camping, I'll read for like literally 8 hours a day, just sitting by the fire, and I'll get down to like 20%, but I'm literally reading like 8-10 hours a day. This thing is just slightly better. Battery life is great on both. It's slightly better on here. Now, this also has the addition of a couple things that I think are better than this. We have the dark mode, which is a big deal for me, actually. I used to like doing this on my Kindle Fire tablet, and that just flips everything. Now, remember, this is never going to be an OLED device. Well, maybe someday, but this is not an OLED. So these blacks are, as you can see, not as black as the bezel. But it's still pretty good, and to me that actually looks more like ink. And this is good for reading at night and stuff like that, when you don't want to throw too much light. So I like that feature. It's not one I'm going to use too much, but it's great. But the big thing here is the warm light. Now, I like to kick the warm light around 8 or so. I don't actually like to read with the warm light off ever, because around 8 or 9, it starts to look a little bit more like a book page, that cream-colored book, paper that's easy on our eyes. So that's really nice. And then if you kick this thing up all the way to 24, it turns yellow, amber. Now that might look too extreme, and if you're looking at this as a comparison, and maybe it will be to some people. For someone like me, it's actually coming across a fair bit more yellow on camera than it is in person. In person, it has much more of a cream color. So I want to just let you know for sure that it does not look this yellow in person. It has much more of a realistic book page. It is a little overdone at 24, but if you bring it down to like 14, man, it looks great. It's very easy to read. So that can also be set on a schedule, which I didn't even realize. And then when you go into your schedule, you pick when you want, and you can also pick the how much intensity you want. So that's a game changer. That's like a big, huge deal. That was the main reason I got this thing, but there's all these other little features. We also have some minor features like page turn animations. We don't have that on here to my knowledge. Now, as you can see, let's get into the crispness of the text, which will probably be my last point here. And this is something that I guess I know this is stupid to say, but you'll have to take my word for it because you can't really tell on camera. On camera, I'm using Bookerly, by the way. This is my favorite font for reading on these devices. The font looks pretty comparable, other than the fact that, of course, the screens are different. This one has, you can fit more text on the page. Like I said, it looks more like a book. Let's turn that warmth light off just for comparison's sake. The text looks comparable, but actually on here, excuse me, let's just go here. I'm rocking Bookerly 4. However, on here, it's Bookerly 3. Okay? Come on. And this is a little bit more responsive. Okay? Minor, but a little bit more. Not enough to, if that was the only selling point, it's not worth it, but it is a nice thing. This is 3 in bold 1. So if I put it on bold here, as you can see, it looks a little bit more bold on here than here, and that's because of the increased pixel density. And if I bring this to 3, as it is on here, it actually looks a fair bit smaller. Now, to me, that looks more like a page out of a book, right? I mean, that looks like an e-reader. That actually looks like the page out of a book, but I have perfect vision, and I actually find that's just a touch too small for me. So I put it on 4, okay? And now it's looking more comparable. I don't do any bold. I think it's crisp enough to not need it. I really wish that Amazon would take another look at their fonts because I think the sizing is weird. I think that I would prefer a 3.5. This isn't too big for me, but I just wish it was a touch smaller. 3 is just a touch too small. Then 2, really small. And then 1, dramatically smaller. Let me get to 1 here. Who the fuck could read that? I mean, people say they read on 1, that's so small. So I think Amazon needs to take a look at their sizing. They either need to change their sizing so it doesn't dramatically jump or offer 0.5 settings. But as it stands, 0.4 on here for me, or 4 rather, is good. No bold Bookerly, great. Atkinson Hyperlegible is also a great font. You have to download that, but that's easy to do. Just connect your Kindle to your computer, go into your Kindle file, there's a font folder, and drop the font in there, and boom, you can add whatever fonts you want. Atkinson Hyperlegible, that's a good one for people with eye issues. Yeah, that's basically it. The screen in here is 300 ppi. I want to say it's 167 ppi in here, and that makes a big difference. And I said you have to just kind of take my word because you can't really tell the difference, right? It basically looks the same other than the color difference of the lights. But I have to tell you, there is a big difference. Now, as my running theme is that this one is good enough for the average person, the person that doesn't read a ton, that just wants to get into it. This will probably be fine. But if you're like me, you love reading and you want an e-reader, do yourself a favor and get this one because the added crispness of the text makes a tremendous difference. This does occasionally get blurry on me. Now, it doesn't look like it now, but I'm telling you, it does occasionally look a little blurry. Now, if I even zoom in, you can't really tell. But I'm telling you with your own eyes, you will see it's a little bit blurry where I don't really get that on here. This looks like cheap newspaper print, which is fine. This looks like a laser printer. So yeah, this just is so crisp. And that also comes into play. Let's go to the library. I read some weird books, by the way. Again, looks pretty much the same. By the way, who else hates this Amazon update they did to the Kindles? I hate it. But looks the same, other than, slight size difference. The book covers on here are tremendously different. They look like paper. Like I said already, this is never going to look like an OLED screen, but what it does look like more to me is paper. It looks like I'm looking at paper covers. They are very crisp on here. I can make out small details, especially in here, in this American Psycho cover. What was one good cover I saw? Cows by Matthew Stokoe. Weird, nasty book, but that's a beautiful looking cover, and the detail comes across on here. It just doesn't do that on here. All right, it just It doesn't. Again, I know you're probably laughing right now and going, dude, they look the same. Trust me, there's a tremendous difference. Now, does that make a difference? Does that really matter? Well, it kind of does a little bit when I'm scrolling, and also when I'm scrolling through the store. My eyes kind of are drawn to covers, of course, marketing. And it's harder. Sometimes they get extremely blurry on here, even worse than they are here. And on here, I've just never had an issue. That's also going to come into play with graphic novels. I'm going to tell you straight up, if you're someone that exclusively reads manga, graphic novels, and things like that of that nature, comic books, I would maybe even not suggest either of these, because this does a commendable job. This is useless for that. So you might even want to look into, if that's your main bag, look into a color reader or something specialized for that. I don't know what that would be, but perhaps look into that. However, if you like to read the occasional graphic novel or manga like I do, this is totally serviceable. This is just a random Star Wars one. I downloaded a demo just for these purposes. I like me some Star Wars too. This looks awfully good. And it doesn't look hyper crisp, but it looks like paper. The text is a touch small, but it's still readable to me. And you can double click and go in here and look at the panel. You can also zoom in, although that's going to get pretty blurry pretty quick. As you can see, that doesn't look too good. But you can do that if you want. But it looks pretty good. I mean, it's totally readable. On here, no, forget it. It's not happening. You're going to hurt your eyes. I truly mean that. It's not going to happen. Now, I do have one big qualm, and it's a big one. I find there's some like ghosting issues on here, almost like a burn-in thing. It's kind of hard. Like, here we go. See that? That's like burn-in from another panel. Let's go back. There's some burn-in there, too. This happens frequently when reading graphic novels exclusively. It does not happen with books, so I don't want to make you freak out over that. But it happens with graphic novels. You can even see the scrolling text, right? It's like OLED burn-in. That happens frequently. It's someone, for me, it's not going to be a huge deal with how infrequently I read these kind of things. But again, like I said, if you're someone that wants to read exclusively novels and stuff, I mean, that's not really going to work for you, right? So that's kind of a unfortunate con that I've discovered with this device. But it is certainly better than here, where you're barely going to be able to decipher what's going to happen. Now, again, I'm kind of going on a tangent now, but when I was showing you these very small text bubbles, which are still readable, but quite small, these would be unintelligible on this device. So that's a difference there. So overall, I really recommend this one. I know it's more expensive. Perhaps you can wait for it to go on sale. But if you're someone that reading is a hobby for you, it's not just something you do a couple times a year, you really like to read, get this. The Oasis, I don't even have to compare to you. Maybe that's better, but I almost feel like the 7-inch screen would be pushing it, because this is just pushing it. So I think that would be too big, and I don't like the metal asymmetrical feel of that. Page turn buttons aren't something that interests me personally, but that's a whole other video. But this one, it does have its place. I don't want to totally disregard this and say, this is the cheap, shitty one, get this one, because some people might have some benefit out of this, all right? This is a totally usable device. It is not a piece of junk. It does feel cheap. It does feel like corners were cut in the creation of this, but it's certainly serviceable for reading. It's not like you're going to be having a horrible experience reading on it. I've read quite a few books on it, and this one is just an absolute joy for me. So yeah, ebooks are awesome. These devices are awesome. I absolutely love ebooks. Maybe someday I'll do a video on why I prefer ebooks to text or to printed books, but that's just that. I hope this was helpful. Excuse me. Quite a thorough video. I didn't expect it to be this long. If you stuck through, I really appreciate it. But this is something I'm extremely passionate about, and I was very excited and just wanted to share it with you. So if you have one of these devices, let me know, or you have one of the older models or something like that. Yeah, let me know what's going on. So peace out. Have a great day.